This podcast is brought to you by ProLongevity, the award-winning 8-week program that can transform the lives of people with prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and many other lifestyle-related illnesses. Founded by Phillips, the pharmacist who gave up drugs.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of ProLongevity podcast. I have with me today someone a little bit different, a guy called Reed Davis, who will be very familiar to the American audience and to audiences around the world, but less so to the Brits. And Reed is what we might call an alternative practitioner. We might call him a functional medicine practitioner. In fact, what I'm proposing to do is let Reed introduce himself to the audience and describe how he likes to be called. So let's start with that, Reed, and welcome. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. And of course, I love the Brits. That's my heritage. My family's all, I was born in Canada, actually, but my family was all British. And my mother, who's 94 and been here since she was a little girl in North America, still has her British passport. Yay. So
you guys can't escape us.
Yeah.
The special relationship.
A very special relationship. Yeah. And I prefer just to be looked at as a teacher. You know, I teach. I did work in a clinic for many, many years, and I ran laboratory tests on thousands of people, and I made a lot of observations and recognized some patterns. I also had great mentoring, must say. But after 10 years of running thousands of labs on thousands of people, Graham created a system. A system kind of evolved out of that, of how to look at underlying causes and conditions. And then what the person could do themselves to how could they take control of their own health based on the data and the problems they were having. So anyway, so I created this system of investigation and all natural drug-free protocols. You'll be glad to know about that. And then put the people back in charge of their health, what I teach now. So after 10 years of doing it, I was kind of pushed into teaching. Someone said, you should be teaching. And I okay, I'll try it. And I really have loved it. And it's really ended up creating quite a community of graduates. You know, it's a very robust program. People who sign up for my program often don't know what they're getting into. It's a lot to bite off and chew. Anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and the things that took me a long time to learn. And so that's what I do. I teach. I'm a teacher. And it's a course in functional laboratory work as it applies to all natural drug-free protocols, and empowering the people who will invest in the laboratory work and be open to getting some very good coaching based on, again, their problems, how they show up. Most people, as you know, Graham, I think have lived themselves into their problems.
Absolutely.
We teach them how to live themselves out of it.
I think
it's as simple as that, really.
Beautifully put. So we've kind of got ahead of ourselves, and I want to go into more of the detail of all the things. But tell us a little bit more about how you ended up here, because you didn't start off where you are today.
I was in
What was your journey that led you here?
Yeah, well, I was a Boy Scout in Canada. I always wanted to do good in the world, and I shoveled my neighbor's driveway for free and raked their leaves. I just always been a do-gooder, wanting to do some good. Prior to being in the health space, I was in environmental law and conservation, kind of saving the whole planet, if you will. And if you've heard my podcast, that's the air, bird, water, trees, bees.
Yep.
And really, I was observing how the flora and fauna of the planet were not doing so well, and sometimes horribly. And then I started wondering about people, and including myself. So what's happening to people and me? And I just changed jobs. I went from environmental law and conservation to working in a clinic. And I was hired because of my enthusiasm and willingness to learn. And I had a lot to learn. I didn't have anything to unlearn because wasn't in that field. So I started at the bottom. And thank God the people at the clinic were very open and just gave me all of these challenges and opportunities. And so I capitalized on those. I would, interviewed every person walking in the clinic and realized, man, they're all suffering from lifestyle diseases, and they've been turned away from their standard medicine. Like a lot of them were told, nothing's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Nothing's wrong with you. Everything looks normal. And yet they knew something's wrong. I don't feel like I did before. I can't think straight. I'm overweight. I'm tired, and don't sleep well. My libido's gone. You name it. And not to mention, worse than that some of the more developed maladies. And so I started just, thank goodness, again, the doctors and clinicians where I worked were open to me just using their tools and applying it in a non-medical way to the individuals coming in. Things miraculously started to open up when, for instance, a woman came in the office and she was coming in for chiropractic, acupuncture, massage, and those modalities. And I was walking her back to the treatment room, and I could tell she was sad. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Oh, it's just 40 pounds of weight." Again, if you listen to my podcast, I tell the story quite a bit. To me, it was pivotal. Over 20 years ago, she said, "I feel really sad because of this 40 pounds that I'm carrying around, and it's not my fault. There's nothing I could do about it. I'm on medication for the hives, steroids and things, and they've made me gain this weight. I've been on it for 2 years."
Yep.
And I said, "Well, and I was about to make a recommendation, and she says, "And I just came from my physician, my regular doctor, quote unquote, regular doctor. And I told him how disturbing it was to be 40 pounds overweight. And according to her, he said, 'Lady, you can be fat or you can have the hives. Take your pick.'"
Yeah, that's great bedside manner, hey?
Yeah, well, then she said, "Well, doctor, that's so depressing."
Yeah.
He said, "I'll be happy to write your prescription for antidepressants if you want." So now I understood her countenance that day was so low. And I said, "Well, but first name, why didn't you ever try to find out why you get the hives?"
Yeah.
And her head did an exorcist spin around. What do you mean? So skipping to the end of the story real fast here, we found out that she was sensitive to some foods and chemicals in her environment. We just changed a few things, and she was off the medication within 9 days from our report of findings, and told her doctor so, and started exercising to a sweat and taking hot showers. She told me she hadn't had a hot shower or exercised in 2 years because of, even on the medication, she would get the hives. Yeah. And so that's a miracle. That was one of the early things that told me I was on the right track. And then I have just all these other stories right behind it that we kept learning and finding underlying causes and conditions, food sensitivity being just one of them. And so what I actually discovered was this whole pattern that exists in almost every person with problems like that, asthma, migraines, you name it, joint pains. Fibromyalgia was big back then, ADD and ADHD and all these things. We found out, look, there's always causal factors that can be discovered.
Yeah, fascinating. Remarkably similar. I think we come from very different positions, but I think we've ended up in a very similar place. And I think our life experiences are similar.
Yeah.
Maybe our treatment approaches are similar too. I guess we'll find that out. So I know that you've been in this space before the space really existed. I mean, you almost invented what I suppose we call complementary or alternative approaches. These days we call it functional medicine. What's your interpretation? What do you think we should call it, and what do we actually mean?
Yeah, functional medicine's a good name, and it tries to work at the underlying causal level. It at least looks, but it has not fully evolved. And of course, I've seen, what I did starting in 1999. That was the last century. We were strictly alternative, kind of wacky. But the lab guys, the scientists that I knew, they were the ones who were onto something. And I just followed along, learning. And I fortunately also had a clinic that I was working in that had lots of sick people coming through. So I was learning the lab work and the science and very fascinating things. about blood, saliva, urine, stool, these alternative ways of looking at data relative to a person and how they're functioning. So function is very important. But I also had the place to apply that knowledge. The clinic with all of these people coming through were frustrated, like that lady I told you about, and they had not been exposed to underlying causes, conditions, that whole research area. So anyway, so I saw this alternative after a few years became what was called complementary, or like, hey, you could do medicine and do this complementary to it, like in addition. Hey, in addition, why not look for the causes? What a concept. While you're still treating the disease medically, hey, why not look for the cause? So it became now it also then developed, I would say, evolved into integrative, where you're expected to do both. And that's, I think, where functional medicine came from, which is what it's called now. That came from integrative, where we're trying to do both.
Yeah.
Functional medicine doctors are still doctors. They still have to, according to their licensure, which I look at as handcuffs, they still have to diagnose and treat in order to meet their standard of care.
Yeah.
And that's not always a bad thing, but it really is in conflict with my approach, which is strictly underlying causes and conditions.
Yeah.
I have no ability to write a prescription, don't want to, and neither do any of our clients. And so we just stayed in our own backyard or sandbox, if you will. And yet at the same time, I've seen medicine go from alternative to complementary to integrative to now functional medicine. It's not fully evolved because they're still trapped the diagnosis and treatment model, which makes them label a cluster of symptoms or condition or whatever it is, and then the standard of care is hardly up to them. It's more or less predetermined by the forces that are in control. The white coat, the government, the pharmaceutical industry is so powerful, and they pretty much are still in charge of all the education of those people, at least initially. So it has not evolved, is my comment about functional medicine, not fully.
I completely agree. What you've described is pretty much my own journey. For 25 years, I practiced conventionally. I was conventionally trained as a pharmacist. And I looked around me and I thought, well, I'm spooning ever more tablets into people. Was that what I set out to do? I don't think it was. And that would be fine if, the drugs bill's going up and up, but people are getting fatter and sicker and more diabetic by the day. I don't really feel I'm doing any good. And it was that quest for doing some, fulfilling what I think all health professionals, that we don't come into our professions to spoon tablets into people and write prescriptions for them initially, but that's where we're kind of led down this blind alley by our training. And what do you do at that point? You might burn out and just carry on. You might leave, or you might actually say, you know what? Let's, exactly as you were saying, go back to root cause, re-examine the root causes, which is what I do, and apply all the science knowledge that I had and end up with a different endpoint, sort of going, ending up in a cul-de-sac or a dead end. I now feel I've got some solutions. So
wonderful.
We've talked about functional medicine. I'm almost thinking those of us who are conventionally trained, we talk about allopathic medicine. I wonder if we should actually call it dysfunctional medicine, because for two reasons. One is we're treating dysfunction, and two, the process itself is dysfunctional, I think. What's your take?
Very good. Naming it's pretty hard. I actually came up with the term, I'll tell you in just a moment, but what I do is called functional diagnostic nutrition. The only reason it's called that is because I had to come up with the name for my first seminar. So I'd actually been doing, I was a nutritionist, I was a fitness trainer, I have about 15 certificates in stuff, modalities and what have you. But really what I did was investigate using laboratory work and then find ways to get people to change their habits. And that became our way of doing things in the office. So, and we got busy, like it was working. We were getting great results. And everybody just said, Reed, you should be teaching. This is 10 years later. A lot of some failures, some mistakes, a lot of successes. And again, recognizing these patterns of investigation. And then, it occurred to me a long time ago, hey, Mrs. Smith, you're coming in the office 2, 3 times a week for treatment. What are you doing at home? And that study of what are they doing at home became the empowerment. Like, well, you don't have to come in the office anymore if you just get your diet and rest and exercise and stress reduction and supplementate, get all those things in alignment, and you'll produce different results. You can live yourself out of the problems you lived yourself into. So, but then finally, when I went to start teaching it, I just came up with this name, functional, because it is, and function is everything, and as is dysfunction. And diagnostic in nature, they're not medical diagnosis. It's functional or foundational, and the D is diagnostic in nature, or just data driven might be a better way to say it. Data driven, and everyone owns their own data. This to me is critical, that people should get their own test results. You should have every lab that you've ever done with a physician or whoever, and have a copy of it, so we could look historically over all of this data. The data is wonderful. And then nutrition, because I was a certified nutritional therapist, and it's really nurturing. So FDN could be functional diagnostic nutrition, it's called that, but foundational, data-driven, nurturing, and it's self-directed. We can run the labs, give you the data, tell you what it means, make some suggestions on the lifestyle. Really important, and I've really researched the diet that's right for the individual, the rest and exercise and stress reduction and supplementation. By the way, that spells dress, DRESS. It's kind of cute. Dress for health success. So these things, that's why I call it FDN. But the truth is, so we're doing what we would call pure functional medicine, no diagnosis at all, and no medical diagnosis. And if functional medicine, the big bad world of medicine out there, wanted to evolve to the next level, they would call it something like what you just said, dysfunctional medicine, or the word I came up with, Graham, is Intelopathy. Like you have osteopathy, you have craniopathy, you have the Intelopathy. Intelopathy, it's intelopathic, it's intelligence gathering. Intelligent pathway, if you will, based on data gathering, the labs that we run, again, saliva, urine, blood, stool. So it's quite fascinating where it's going. I hope to be around. I'm 71, my mom's 94, so I got a pretty good chance of being around in 25 years when it's really, really evolved.
It's exciting, isn't it?
It's very exciting, and it's good for me to have been in on some of the pioneering aspects of it. I think I really helped develop telemedicine as well, because as I started, we love people, we love being busy. We had a clinic in Southern California, and you need customers, you need clients and patients, right? Yeah. So I would lecture, and I would go out to all the libraries. I lectured in grocery stores. I mean, I would lecture anywhere I could get some people together that would listen, and then they would come in the office for an exam and investigation and things. I started lecturing farther and farther away from the office, and realized that, hey, you don't have to come in the office. Save the office visit fee. We'll just ship you the lab test kits and go over the results basically on the phone back then. There was no cell phones when I started. I always say high tech to me was a pager and a fax machine. That was high tech. Yeah. So, but nowadays, imagine, with Zoom, like we're communicating now from thousands of miles away, and we could be in the next room next door to each other. So I didn't have those advantages. And yet still develop this widespread all over the country, working with people.
Fantastic. Yeah, a true pioneer.
Just a hard worker, guy that
Yeah,
didn't know any better.
yeah,
And you know, if you don't know you can't do something, very often you end up doing it.
yeah. I think, what does it say? Ask forgiveness, not permission, or something like that.
Oh yeah, I didn't have to ask permission very much. The doctors there at the clinic thought I was a man of very high integrity and very industrious, and they respected that. And they
Yeah,
knew I would never cross the line into the other guy's sandbox. You know, I've never diagnosed anything, but I have found, and I want to say this about underlying causes. So that was my read, find out why they're sick. We don't want to just diagnose and treat some labeled one part of that person. And so with the thousands of labs that I ran on thousands of people, there became common, what I call healing opportunities. Very, very common. And there's another acronym for you here, IDTEN, which spells hidden. And in effect, they were hidden. The hormone
mm,
balances, the immune system, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and nervous system imbalances. That spells hidden. There's other things to look for, oxidative stress, and you know, we look at food sensitivities and things, but those hidden areas, again, hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, and so on, were a constant pattern. Everyone with chronic downward spiraling, degenerative type conditions have these hidden dysfunctions, and again, healing opportunities upstream, sometimes very remote or upstream.
yeah,
And here's something you've heard that before, but what you may not have heard emphasized so much is that all of those hidden upstream malfunctions are having an effect on each other.
absolutely.
And you can't measure some of it. And that's coming from a guy who teaches a course in laboratory work. I'm supposedly an expert in lab work. There isn't enough. You can't measure certain things. And so you have to have a system of connecting the dots, so to speak. And that's what I also am known for, is connecting the dots and the downward spiral. And
Yeah,
so I've come up with an investigative system that looks at the stresses and causal factors. And the very typical, what we found out, Graham, is there's a very typical way in which the dominoes fall. And you can sort of just watch it happen, and you can see it from the lab test. Again, the data gathering, and it makes it fairly easy. It's simple enough to then define an individual protocol. Like Mrs. Smith, hormone imbalances, immune system overactive or underactive, digestion isn't working, breaking down and assimilating. And now you've got detoxification problems with liver and kidneys. And I could show you how those dominoes fall using data, using the lab work. And it's quite remarkable. And that people say, wow, I can't believe you sorted me out. It's actually, you hear it enough and it becomes like, well, yeah, that's what we're supposed to be doing
yeah,
here is, and when they say, wow, no one else ever told me why I feel so crappy. You
yeah,
know, oh, it's all in your head, or it's just your thyroid, or it's you have irritable bowel, or here's your medicine and take that and a chill pill besides, you know, and that. It's music to people's ears when you actually sort out what I call metabolic chaos, and we sort it out. You could take that phrase and use it all you like.
absolutely. So
Metabolic chaos is the enemy. You know, that's the real problem.
it really is. Which kind of you segued nicely into what was my next question. I was going to talk about root causes. You know, you walk along, look at any World War One movie, no one's fat.
Any world what?
Any World War One movie,
Oh,
no,
sure. I just watched 1917, fantastic movie
right?
about the British. Yeah.
No one was fat.
No fat people.
No fat people.
Yeah.
And yet we know that most westernized populations are getting fatter and sicker and more diabetic by the day.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Mostly it's a type of poisoning, but it's commercialized food processing and getting people addicted to the taste of salt and sugar and things that are quote unquote bad for you. there's no one food right for everybody, but there's a lot of things that are bad for everybody. And so you now, like you don't have to go back to World War One. When I was a kid, there was maybe one fat person in the whole school.
That was
Growing
me.
up, it was like,
I can tell you that was me. So when I was at school as a kid, I'm a bit younger than you, but not much. I was the fat kid in the class of slim kids.
no,
And I still remember that, like, when they play what we call it football, you call it soccer.
yeah,
I was always the kid that got picked last or nearly last, and they always put me in goal. Not, I wasn't quite fat enough to completely block the goal mouth, but it kind of felt like that.
well,
And you go
that's a
to that,
stereotype,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. But you go
Yeah,
back to that class today, and the slim kid is the odd one out in a generation.
yeah, yeah. It's really kind of it's interesting. It's sad. It could be even called criminal. The
Uh,
influences that are about.
it
And
is,
by the
yeah.
way, with football and soccer, I'm not confused. I'm married to a Brit,
Oh,
so
right.
yeah, so I get it.
Yeah. Well, we got to the finals of the European Cup and lost in the final, but hey ho, at least we had a bit of success.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's a quite a challenging
And I think our
sport.
Prime Minister is in the States at the moment, or he was up there very recently. So,
Was that right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so
He went to the White House and no one was
yeah,
home.
someone was allegedly home, but I won't get into American politics.
Yeah, never
Definitely
mind about that.
won't.
Me neither.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Another fascinating statistic. See, all of us as health professionals are born into this escalating milieu of illness, fatness, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. And I do want to come to metabolic syndrome. But almost no one knows this. The first recorded heart attack in the entire world's medical literature was recorded in 1910 in the US.
Hmm.
And when it was presented at a medical conference, everyone said, "So what? Like, there's only been one. Why would we be interested?" And so, something that was vanishingly rare, stroke almost unheard of in 1910, is now pretty much the single largest killer worldwide.
There's no question about it.
Absolutely. And the same is broadly true of diabetes, and the same is broadly true of the neurodegenerative disorders. And everyone talks about dementia, but actually the fastest growing of those is Parkinson's disease. And yet none of us as health professionals are ever taught the history, and none of us are ever taught root causes. All we're taught is diagnosis and drugs. And the doctors are excellent at the diagnosis, and the pharmacists are very good at the drugs. And that's the onward march. And it's deeply, deeply, deeply unsatisfying way to practice your profession.
Yeah, I fully empathize, of course. I came from a different field, and as I said, I had a lot to learn,
Mm.
but I had nothing to unlearn. I had not been indoctrinated, so it was maybe easier in
I
that
think it
regard.
is. I think it is
Yeah,
because we're handed down, I don't know, cholesterol is a bad thing, and we're handed that down on tablets of stone. And you'd have to be a flat earther to challenge that because it's not true. Just like we're handed down saturated fat makes you fat and gives you heart attacks, and eating salt's going to kill you. It's all rubbish. And when you discover it, as I did, like sort of well into your career, first of all, you've got to acknowledge to yourself that maybe you've got it wrong all this time, and maybe you should have challenged it sooner. And then you become like me, pretty damned angry because I feel I've been lied to. Then I feel that in some ways I've spent much of my professional career doing my absolute best and perhaps doing as much harm as good in many ways. And I guess you've escaped that kind of tyranny because you haven't had to deal with that.
yes, I was not dependent on my living for perpetuating any of that line of thinking, and that is the huge problem: is that the financial model. There's the algorithms of
Yeah.
getting paid when you're a physician that are you'd have to give up your profession almost.
Yeah.
And we have had some who've given up their licenses and
Yep.
say, I just want to do natural, like we call it all natural medicine, but and I call it functional diagnostic nutrition. But the algorithms involved in in getting, diagnosing and treating, getting paid,
Yep.
and that's by insurance companies, or whether they're single
Or in our
payer or
case, it's the
multiple.
NHS.
Yeah, so you try
Okay.
breaking out of that when you have 4 kids and 2 of them are
Yeah.
going into college, and it's very difficult to break out of that system.
I mean, this is the big problem for me as a community pharmacist. I mean, I had 10 pharmacists at one point. We're now down to 2. And I'm trying to create a completely new model of care and make prevention front and center. We're basically trying to turn it into a clinic rather than a prescription factory.
Yes.
I keep saying to payors, you pay me money for dispensing medicines. That's my core income. And there's a bit more to it in the UK.
Yeah.
But most of my income comes from dispensing medication. When I get people off all this medication, it saves the NHS a fortune, it benefits the patient. But as a community pharmacist, I don't get any of the benefits. I'm literally shooting myself in the foot financially. Why don't you incentivize me as more for deprescribing as prescribing? And that's where we could be. I mean, there's nothing. Pharmacists are generally associated with the provision of medicines, right? That's, I think, more so in the States. But there's nothing inherent about us. The one thing we learn is we learn how medicines work, but we know about numbers needed to treat, numbers needed to harm, right? So we know that life isn't a clinical trial, and we know where the harms lie and what the balance is. It doesn't take, it's not a big stretch to go from there to where you and I are in similar places now. But we need to, I'm trying to fight to change the system here so that we're rewarded for a different model of practice. But it has to be obviously financially sustainable.
Yeah, for sure it does. I've managed to, the quote is, make a good living by not prescribing, but it takes the right client, of course, and it is people who are searching for something alternative or different, and who don't want to just take the pill. And some are very happy to do that, and they think that that's going to mitigate their bad behavior or poor behavior. Their behavior is what has resulted in their issues.
Yeah.
And if you could teach them that and give them some leverage on the various dysfunctions, they'll pay you. They will pay you for that. They'll pay for health. It's an investment. So getting people to understand health is an investment, and the kind of health services that the government provides, or insurance companies in the States. And by the way, I'm on Medicare, which is a one-payer system for people over 65. It's the law. You have to get Medicare. You don't have your private insurance anymore. And so I'm in that system. And I just say that the first question they asked me when I first walked in the office, when I turned 65, you get notices. And it's like, you have to go and here's your doctor. And so I went just to see what was up. And the first question they said was, may we see your Medicare card, your ID card?
Yeah.
The second question was, what is your preferred pharmacy? Because they figured, well, this guy's going to be walking out with a prescription or 2.
Yeah.
And when I told them that I'm not on any medication, I don't have a pharmacy, well, why? They almost said, what's wrong with you that you're not on medication? Well, what's wrong with you?
System.
Yeah, so it's just so ingrained in society and the way of thinking. And some people are okay with that.
Yeah.
And they actually identify more with their diagnosis and drugs than they do with reality, the things that they are actually responsible for and can take it. So there's enough people, thank goodness, that will pay you for your services and to get out of that system. They don't want to just rely on pills to, like, they know I'm willing to change my diet, but what diet should I choose? With you, you're very familiar with metformin, for instance.
Absolutely.
I don't know what the equivalent is there, but it's something that helps with insulin resistance, right? So no, you don't have to change your diet. Just take this pill. And some people, that's music to their ears. Not our customers. Our customers don't think that way.
Well, I go some way down the track with you, but thing is, the most people are never given an alternative option, right? So it's like everyone's on metformin. in your 60s, of course you're going to be on metformin and a statin and an antihypertensive. And of course now we've got Wegovy and Ozempic, so things are really
Oh my.
ready to go, you know.
Yeah.
So we started to explore this, but what's your take on the root cause? Why are we getting fatter and sicker? What happened since I was the only fat kid in the class of slim kids?
Convenience foods are certainly a huge part of it, and the sugar and the chemicals, the artificial ingredients and everything. I think there's the guilty parties who are selling this stuff, and they're allowed to. In Europe, it's actually stricter than in the States. You could sell all kinds of garbage here. It doesn't matter if it hurts people, because that's actually good for the medical community. It keeps them in control of people's health, although it's not health. God, I have so many things to say about this, because you really touched a place in me that actually upsets me quite a bit. And when I was in law, I was an environmentalist and conservationist protecting the planet, and I take the same approach. It's an advocacy for the consumer. So as a consumer advocate, it's just horrible what they're shoveling in our kids' faces.
Yeah.
And it's convenient for the parents. They make it easy on the parents. Let me give you a quick example, if I could.
Sure.
I had a client who was a principal of charter schools. So charter schools here are private schools. So you can set them up. It's highly regulated, but you can have your own school and teach, and you get parents who take their kids because they want them in that system rather than the public schools.
Yeah.
So she was working for a charter school company that had 5 schools in our area, and she would go to each of the 5 days of the week to these 5 schools. She's the principal of all 5 schools.
Yeah.
She started to sit in on the parent-teacher child conferences for disciplinary meetings. So kids misbehaving, they call the parents in and have a conference. And she started sitting in on those. I was educating her, and we were working together, this principal. And she said, Reed, you wouldn't even believe it. I started sitting in on these meetings with bad kids. She started asking them one question. What did you have for breakfast?
Yep.
What percentage do you think were eating sugary, sweet, colored, all kinds of garbage stuff?
Pretty much 100%, I would think.
It was 100%.
Yeah.
And you're the first guy to get that right. Most people say 80, 90. No, it's 100% of the kids were eating garbage for breakfast. So what do you expect? And that's my point. That's what gets me kind of excited. And another really quick story, because it illustrates the point. So I had a lady coming in as a client to our office. Now I work strictly virtually. I don't have an office. Forget that. Don't need it. But she was coming in the office for the practitioners and me, and she was doing very good. She asked if I worked with children. And of course, I love kids and working with them. I've been a football coach for 15 years back then, and American football, I have to say. And I said, yeah, I work with kids. Why? She goes, well, they're sending my kid home from school if I won't put him on medication. The drug at the time was Ritalin, which in our country is a class 2 narcotic.
It is, yeah.
Okay, and that's the same class as cocaine.
Yeah.
So they wanted to put, by the way, 9-year-old kid on a class 2 narcotic. And I said, well, what's your problem with that? Jokingly. And she got mad at me and said, no, can you help my son or not? Because I don't want to put him on medication. And I said, I don't know. Let's do some tests. We did food sensitivity, chemical sensitivity, and other things. Got him on a different program, a personal well-being program. And within 3 weeks, Graham, I got a call from the principal of the school who said, Mr. Davis, I tracked you down through the mom, and I'm really curious. This is a different boy. He's paying attention. He's not poking the other kids. He's not outbursting loudly in class inappropriately, and on and on. And then I was all music to my ears until he said, "What did you put them on?"
Yeah.
You're laughing. You're so in tune with this, Graham. You are so in tune because that's right. What you put them on, And I said, "Sir, we put them on a better diet,
Yeah.
a better bedtime schedule, a better homework and exercise schedule. We
Yeah.
put them on a different lifestyle, and that's the answer." And he didn't want to hear that. He just wanted to know, where's the magic pill.
Yeah.
So you get. I think everyone gets that's the key.
I agree. I mean, we've got family in the States and we were there recently. Long story short, so there was Heinz tomato ketchup, which are very familiar in the UK. And
Yeah, I don't use it, but yeah, I get it.
So the label is identical on the front to the UK label.
Huh.
So I idly looked at the back and I thought, blimey, even that's got high fructose corn syrup in. Right?
Can you imagine?
We don't have it. But
Huh.
I don't know the statistics for the US, but I can tell you we in the UK are the sick man of Europe. We're the fattest, the most diabetic, and the sickest. And with ever declining mental health, particularly in young people. 60% of our calories in the UK come from ultra-processed food. And in the case of teenagers, it's 80%.
Wow.
And to me, it's not difficult to explain why young people's brains are not developing properly. When they're not, people don't know that the brain is only 5% of your body mass, but it's 20% of your energy requirements. It needs a lot of energy and a lot of nutrition. And we're basically filling these kids with poison. It makes me very, very angry, actually,
Yeah.
when I see this. And because they market like crazy all this stuff and the kids fall for it. And then, like you say, they will end up with ADHD and depression, learning difficulties, and it's a generational change. And of course, they will end up on these drugs as a consequence. And
yeah, because
about the root cause, just treat the symptoms.
Yes, they all have drug deficiencies.
Yeah. We're all obviously born with statin deficiency and metformin deficiency and Ritalin deficiency.
Ritalin deficiency. That's very, very prevalent.
Ritalin deficiency syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the adults have all got Ozempic deficiency syndrome or WIG deficiency. Yeah. So, I mean,
great sense of humor.
I think we're agreed that the ultra processed food is, I would say, the single largest root cause. I don't know if you'd go with me.
Well, now add to that kids who are allowed to sit in front of these electromagnetic frequency waves. They're doing this all day long, and they're not out there exercising. I saw something by one of my favorite people, Jordan Peterson, recently that he put out. The kids need to work out or be exercised or activity almost to exhaustion.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
every day,
particularly boys,
7 days a week. Yeah. And then they can have a chance to be healthy if they're also providing. And then to the folks, it's really simple. There's protein, fat, carbohydrates. Those are the three macronutrients. Yeah. Protein, fat, carbohydrates. And looking at a plate, it needs to be real food, not from a bag or a box for the most part, and so protein, fat, and carbs. Now, in that, you'll find the micronutrients. And those are vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, antioxidants, trace elements, phytonutrients, and so on. Yeah. So protein, fat, and carbs. And you tell me where in a box of cereal you can determine really, because the little thing they put on there is baloney.
There's what it says on the front, look at the back.
Yeah.
Look at the ingredients list, and if it's got some things you've never heard of, put it back on the shelf.
Your 6 syllables. I always say, watch out for those 6-syllable ingredients. Yeah. Yeah. And
my favorite, I did a thing with Krispy Kreme donuts, and I said, this isn't food, this is a chemistry experiment.
Absolutely, yes. But here at the fair, you can go to a state fair, these carnivals and things like that, and get deep fried Krispy Kreme donuts.
Even better. Added seed oils.
Yeah, add your hydrogenated oil to that.
Perfect. Perfect metabolic poisons. Okay, so I think we're agreed on the food.
On everything so far, Graham.
I
Yeah.
think we're agreed on the exercise. And much as I always say to people, you can't out-exercise the bad, you can't outrun a bad diet. It is fundamental, particularly for children. So what else features in your list of evils that's created this sick population we now have?
Oh, I mean, the list is kind of endless. Where I point people to a lot of times is the EWG.org. It's the Environmental Working Group. So EWG.org is a great place to go and look at what might be in your regular daily routine all around you. Everything from your draperies, which are outgassing, the new carpeting and rugs that are outgassing. Even children's clothes are full of fire retardants, which outgasses. And so these are all neurotoxins and toxins. So it's what you're breathing. Now, we won't even go to electromagnetic frequencies because people watch way too much TV and have screens this far away from their faces and things like that. So the amount of chemicals in the air, water, ground, therefore food, and the animals that eat that food that you eat, all these sort of things, it's unbelievable. The number of chemicals, it's tens of thousands, and a few thousand only out of tens of thousands have been tested for safety. The other safety test is us. We're the rats in the maze being tested upon.
100%. Yeah.
And you could make cast aspersions and make allusions to recent forced injections and things that are the same thing along the lines of human experimenting, which was outlawed during the Nuremberg trials as a result of the 60 years ago, 70 years ago. Unbelievable what's being how humans are being experimented upon without their knowledge, without their consent. Not to get political, but this is just the facts, and awareness is nil. That's why you're doing this show, Graham, because you care and you want to educate people. And you can lead them to the water still, and they still won't drink it. Well, that sounds good for you, and I'm glad you're all healthy, but I like my fish and chips and my beer, my stout
So do
stuff.
I.
Which who doesn't love that?
Yeah.
But there's other considerations to have, and it's also expensive. Real healthcare is going to cost you an investing of time, like your own food preparation time and buying the best foods and things that aren't so convenient. It's hard to get to all of it, but those chemicals in the environment have been found in the snow on Mount Everest. So on the top of Mount Everest, I think 28,000 feet. I don't know how many meters that is for you guys, but it's really high.
It's a lot of feet. Yeah.
And my goodness, they found hundreds of chemicals in the snow on Mount Everest because it gets into the atmosphere, and there it goes. The same thing with umbilical cords from newborn babies. They've tested for all the metals and different toxins in umbilical cords and found hundreds of unwanted chemicals in that. That means the mother was polluted in a sense and has polluted her infant. And the downstream ramifications for that go on and on and on. Now, so you can start off in bad shape. You're just a baby. And then you get a bunch of stuff shoveled in your face until you're an adult. And even as a teenager or younger, you're overweight and out of shape. And but thank goodness there are people who care and who are doing really good research. I don't know if you've read, and a good guy for you to interview would be David Perlmutter, who recently wrote Drop Acid. Talks about uric acid and what a great measurement that is of early catching too high of or mismanagement of glucose levels is what it is.
So glucose levels is something I do a lot because all our clients get a continual blood glucose monitor, so they can see and we can see in real time how they're responding to their diet. So
and you'll find out you get such interest.
They get shocked.
Instant
healthy whole
feedback.
grains in their daily porridge, and absolutely. So we've kind of agreed it's environmental, and we've discussed without kind of going into the weeds of it all what. So, next question: what to do about it? What are the solutions?
You know, awareness, obviously, and education. I have our lab and data-based protocols. We call it DRESS. Again, diet, and it's critical. Rest is critical, and that includes more than sleep. It's resting your emotions and spirit any time of day, things like that. Realizing when you're out of balance. Diet, rest, exercise goes without saying these days. The two S's in dress are stress reduction and supplementation. I don't sell supplements, but I know a lot about them, and they're very helpful in supporting and substituting for what's missing from food. Food doesn't even have all the the constituents you need, genetically speaking. And so but stress reduction, so DRESS, diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction. If you just can understand the stressors, like what can you do about it? Understand that every stressor, whether it's a mental, emotional stressor, a physical ache or pain, that's a stressor, accidents and injuries and things, not to mention the chemical assaults. Those are stressors as well. Yeah. And physiologically, we respond the same way with, the stress response. So we're being pushed into fight, flight consistently, constantly. And it's so prevalent, so ubiquitous that a lot of people don't even know they're stressed out.
No, because it's become the way of life, and it's just life, isn't it?
They start to call it normal.
Because it is our new normal. Yeah.
And so that's where the awareness begins, with realizing if you feel crappy, if there's something about your health that you want to change, that you don't like, it's called realize that's not normal. Headaches aren't normal. Stomach aches and irritability and all these things they're not normal, but we're told they're normal.
Yeah.
I had a client of mine, went to see her regular physician, and was told that at 32 hysterectomies were normal.
What?
Here's your pills. Take them for 3 months. If it doesn't clear up, we'll do a hysterectomy. It's perfectly normal these days. And that's where the bread is buttered for that practitioners in the surgery. So just, I think people could start with realizing it isn't normal. We're by birthright designed to be healthy and happy. And if you're not, there's a reason. And it might take some investigation, might take hiring a professional investigator, which is what I consider us to be, to determine, to help you. So we're here, we're available. Get the help you need. Realize it's not normal. Don't let anyone tell you symptoms are normal. Yep. They're a sign something's wrong. So let's figure it out.
So when you were talking at the beginning, you were talking about pattern recognition broadly.
Which conditions?
Pattern recognition. You were seeing consistent patterns that you recognize as part of a syndrome or...
Oh, yeah.
Tell me a bit more about what you find, what your conclusions are, and what your approach would be.
So everybody coming in our office 25 years ago was suffering of something and had been told there's nothing really wrong with you, your blood work looks normal. So the patterns that I recognized after thousands of labs with thousands of people was that they almost all had hormone imbalances. So that's the H in hidden. Yeah. And what we do, it's not just your sex hormones. People think of estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. It's your cortisol and your DHEA. So cortisol is a hormone. It's your stress hormone. It activates. It's a big part of the fight flight syndrome, if you will. So you go into fight flight from stress, any kind, and your cortisol goes up. And even if you lose the ability to produce cortisol real well, they call it adrenal fatigue. We don't use that term anymore, but you get the point. So your cortisol goes up in relationship to the counter regulatory hormone, which is called DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone. So cortisol and DHEA are the main hormones that identify catabolic and anabolic. Catabolic, you're breaking down. Anabolic, you're building up. So when you're more catabolic, you're breaking down. And then the dominoes will start to fall. And I can give you all the measurements. So I mentioned hormones, and cortisol and THCA are main ones, but then the sex hormones are right behind it. So when you're catabolic, next thing to go likely is going to be the sex hormones. You'll lose libido and all kinds of things. Your periods get off, and you get into early menopause and infertility and all these, like, that's what people think of when they think of hormone problems.
Yeah.
PMS and all this stuff with men, low libido and performance and things. So it's not good for anybody to have stress that's throwing you catabolic. Now the sex hormones go. And so should you just take the sex hormones? Well, you might feel a little better, but why not figure out what the stressors are and reduce or eliminate them? That's our approach. That's been my approach for 25 years. What are those stressors? And so I've helped people sort out stress in big ways. But the next domino to fall is usually the immune system. Because, stressed out people get sick more.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason for that. The cortisol suppresses what's called secretory IgA, an immunoglobulin in the gut, which is where most of your immune system is.
It is. Yeah.
And so when secretory IgA is affected, goes down, you become more susceptible to dysbiosis, the good to bad flora ratio. Is this over people's head, or is this?
No, we talk about dysbiosis and the microbiome and all that lot. So keep going. Yeah.
Okay, but what's so interesting about this is the way the dominoes fall, and I can show you on your paper, on your test results. We'll show you how, look, your hormones are out of balance, not just cortisol, THCA, but the sex hormones.
Yeah.
That explains a lot of symptoms. And you can just take some medicine or even some supplements, but it's not going to fix it. And, oh, by the way, look, we noticed this too, that's affected the immune system. And because it's not as finely tuned as it once was or should be, now you've got a dysbiosis. So when you have a dysbiosis, you can't break down, especially proteins. You need that good flora in the gut to break down food properly. It does, sure, you chew your food and it might even still have strong stomach acid, and it goes into the small intestine where this bacterial action is what really constitutes, assimilation. It can then get assimilated into the body. So on and on. We don't have to go into too much detail, but you'll be dysbiotic and it gets worse from there, because now I think the medical term is bigger, badder bugs. Bigger, badder bugs, the parasites and real bacterial overgrowth and fungal things. Then they start to take over the gut. Well, now you've got all these digestive systems. So you got signs of stress. You've got your sex hormone imbalances creating their symptomatology. And then it goes into the gut, creating symptomatology there. Heartburn, gas, indigestion, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, or the famous alternating diarrhea and constipation.
Yep.
And then it gets worse from there. So I can show you on test results this downward spiral to where now you've got hyperpermeability or leaky gut.
Yeah.
And now your liver's getting congested. So that's detoxification issues. So that's our HIDD, hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification. And I'll show you how the dominoes fall to where you'll end up with energy production problems on a cellular level. Your cells are trained perfectly with divine knowledge of what to do. You don't teach your cells their job. They know their job. That infinite intelligence is what we rely on. But it's being interfered with. They're not functioning normally anymore. And then, of course, the nervous system has to be balanced. Your autonomic, the sympathetic versus parasympathetic, is critical. People live way too sympathetic dominant these days. And so that's our HIDDEN investigation. You can include oxidative stress, of course, but the hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, you're not producing energy, your nervous system's out of balance for all kinds of reasons. And those 6 or 7 things alone, when you understand the healing opportunities, here's the data. Let's let the data dictate the protocol. how you need to eat and what time to go to bed and get up, and the soundness of your sleep quality and what type of exercise. A lot of people actually over exercise.
Keep them in an effort to keep themselves slim. They run like hell to try and keep slim.
And
They're not healthy on the inside. Yeah.
we've taught a lot of runners about that and had them come to us looking pretty good, actually, but really, we'll say messed up inside.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's quite remarkable. Yeah, quite remarkable.
So final thing, we've talked about testing, but not in detail. So that's something that you've really majored on. In as much as you have a standard panel or a standard approach, just walk us through what that might be and what it might look like, and some fundamentals of the interpretation, that the approach that you take.
Yes, I'll do it quickly. And I'll also say that this is where the entry barrier comes in, because people think they can't afford those tests.
Yeah.
I can't afford all that lab work. Really, you can't afford not to do it, because if you want to get better, it's the best investment you could make. We need to look at some saliva, urine, blood, and stool, and even hair sometimes, to find out what the healing opportunities are. Because if you just use most physicians use the sounds like method, lots of other practitioners. Well, it sounds like thyroid, so they run a thyroid test. Because there's a reliable cluster of symptoms that would tell you it looks like your thyroid is dysfunctional. But if that's all you do, you won't get better. Then it'll be something else you test. So there's this approach we take, which is run all the labs up front, HIDDEN, and it takes 5 labs, and it is saliva, urine, blood, and stool, a couple of the urine tests, and we can add to that. We can add more on. But you don't need to at first. You just want to find out what are the healing, HIDDEN, healing opportunities, then resolve that with your changes in lifestyle. Again, DRESS, the right diet, exercise, stress reduction, supplementation.
Yeah.
And so that's our approach. It's actually pretty simple. That's the system I developed by recognizing patterns, which is your question. Like, I didn't pull this out of my butt or, just go to a couple seminars. I went to hundreds of seminars, but I also worked in a clinic making my own observations.
Yeah.
And that's where this pattern came from, our clientele. And so we look at those things, and the lab work would include the hormone tests that I just mentioned. We do that through saliva. It makes it inexpensive and easy to do at home, because no one's going to get their blood drawn that many times. Yeah. And the urine testing is really, really helpful. It identifies clear healing opportunities about that dysbiosis, digestion, the liver function. Congested livers are very common, and the oxidative stress. Yep. And so you get the data. A finger's simple, and that's urine. So saliva, urine, you do it at home. There's a blood test, but it's a finger prick blood test we use. It's very easy to get blood on. You drip it out onto a blotter, you let it dry, you send it to the lab. It costs like a nickel to mail. It's really interesting how cheap it is. But that tells us more about the mucosal barrier. Zonulin, histamine, diamine oxidase, and these elements that tell us how things are doing down there in the gut. And more and more, and obviously the stool testing for the microbiome, parasites, funguses, even viruses, and some functional markers tell us about pancreatic juices and other elements that are very helpful. And of course, last but not least is the food sensitivity testing. Everyone has some. And when you eliminate these foods that your body's reacting to, it's very, very helpful. And I would say that one test has been critical in so many cases, like the young boy I told you about, who the principal called me, wow, different kid. Yeah, got him off the crap and got him onto the good stuff. When both show up on the test isn't just for what's bad, it's here's what you're non-reactive to. So it gives you the list of the good foods as well as the bad foods. Yeah. It's quite remarkable. Those are the 5 labs that we run on every person.
Fantastic. So, I think we've covered an awful lot of ground, and we've been talking for about an hour, which is my normal sort of podcast length. For me, it's fascinating talking to someone, because most of my people on my podcast are people like me who come from orthodox medicine, realized it's failing, and then had to restart. And you haven't really had to restart. You started in a different place, so you haven't been through that journey of pain that the rest of us have suffered. So it's been an absolute delight talking to someone who's kind of come without the prejudice. And like you said, you hadn't got to unlearn stuff, and unlearning things. And this is what I've found, challenging the orthodoxy I was taught and coming up with something different. That's quite difficult. So all power.
Thank you for that. I want to just interject that I had some of those licensed medical doctors who were bound by the handcuffs around me, who were great mentors, because they kept me very clear on what they did versus what I could do. And they mentored me in that way. I was like their alter ego, because I didn't have a board that was going to slap my wrist or jail me, because I was doing what was best for the client or patient. Yeah, so I had great mentorship. I got to tell you, these docs that I worked with, a lot of them stuck their necks out for me too.
No, you were lucky, because not many would do that.
Lucky.
Most of them would dismiss this as it's not conventional, and therefore it doesn't exist.
Oh, I met them too. And plenty of them around.
Yeah.
But it was the open-minded ones who I still respect so much to this day, if they're still living. I mean, 25 years ago, a lot of them were much older, so they were less afraid.
I'm part of a national and an international network of people who come from allopathic medicine, and we're trying to move from dysfunctional medicine to functional medicine. So
I love that. I love
we're
that.
on a roll.
I'm gonna borrow it.
Lovely to meet you.
And you too, Graham.
Next time you're over in Liverpool, give me a shout, and perhaps we'll have a beer together, a warm beer.
Absolutely. Yes, I'd love to.
And thank you very much for your time, and we'll get this podcast up in the next few weeks, and we'll be back in touch.
If you enjoyed the podcast and want to find out more, join our Wellness and ProLongevity Facebook group. Don't forget to subscribe and follow so you never miss an episode, and maybe share to friends and family who might benefit. Finally, if you think you might need help with diabetes, heart disease, or any of the other diseases we discuss, then book a free consultation with Graham. There's absolutely no charge for this, and we would never put you under any pressure. What do you have to lose? Bye for now, and see you for the next episode.